The other one lives out in Spring Valley.
Oh, okay.
So, but the older one is gonna be 40 this summer. They're having a brand new baby, and they've got a 2.5-year-old, and I thought, I can remember being 40 and thinking if I had to start all over again.
Well,
No, I had teenagers at that age and I, yeah, no.
he's good to 50.
Do you have how many grandkids now? And I don't mind. It's not that bad.
No, there's not.
We will have.
This will be our fourth.
My friend, we went to Cantwell High School, which is over, Montebello. And, he's got 27. They said, and all of his,
I'm thinking of Andy,
27.
Andy and Janet. Jesse and Kevin are expecting.
Yeah.
So they'll have 2, 4, and then Scott has, there's 3 because his new wife has.
Hi, Jeff. It's Mike. I'm remote too. Can you hear the meeting room?
I can't hear the meeting room. I can hear you though.
Yeah. When Ben originally opened the meeting, I could hear the participants in the room, and now we're in a dead zone. So
We're a meeting unto ourselves.
right. Let's quick. Let's make some plans. No, wait, maybe they can hear us still.
Yeah, we may be able to.
See if we get any response from.
Well, I think it might be because Ben is muted on our end from the looks of it.
That may be it. I thought there would be a general microphone for the whole
Yeah.
operation there, but maybe not.
We're live.
Okay. Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And August is logging in soon. Davey has requested an absence for health reasons.
Oh, looks like Robert's online.
You would just be a member of the public.
The bottom, Robert mute.
Oh,
He's watching from home. Huh? What do you say?
So he said, I said, yes, what a way to celebrate 45 years of public work. Because I said, I love it. It's so special this time of our lives. See what you get to look forward to. You know, you saw his name. I said, Chicken, you're watching from home. I said, Chuck better watch out. I can hear him.
So
I've done this.
you guys have missed the memo. I needed to grow the beard out in 2022. I'm
Yeah,
not
Mike,
keeping up. Yeah,
I don't know what we're gonna do.
I don't know either. We'll have some catching up to do. You guys are looking good, looking sharp.
Pandemic boredom, I think.
It's just a matter of habit every morning, just scrape the face. Yeah.
What's on this last name?
Zettler? So we don't technically have a chair right now, which would leave it to anyone informally to assume the reins until we conduct our first matter of business.
I'd be happy to, Ben, if you want. Or I guess August is the vice chair.
Yeah, we were supposed to do elections, but we kind of missed out on our last meeting, so I don't know if we want to address that right after we start up or hold off.
Yep.
I guess it depends on what you guys think.
Really hear
Yeah, is there a way to turn up the volume?
I was trying on the TV, but it's on this, isn't it?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
So the agenda calls for annual elections, so we can certainly go that way, August.
Yeah, I mean, I can either start off the meeting and then we can move to that as preliminary or whatever your preference is. That would be my suggestion.
I think we should go with the agenda and convene the meeting and then jump right into the nominations and elections.
All right, well, then we will call this meeting to order. It's a little after 6, but due to technical issues, I think we're all, whoever is going to be here is here now. Preliminary matters. Establishing a planning and zoning chair and vice chair. So as vice chair, I'm temporarily acting as the chair. So I guess an election for the chair position would be appropriate first.
I would like to nominate Jeff Breckel for chair of the.
I
Planning
would
Commission.
support that nomination. Is there anyone opposed to that nomination? Okay, there it shall be. Jeff Breckel is duly elected as the new chair of the Planning and Zoning Board. I hand it over to Jeff.
Well, thanks. So I guess that leads us to the election of the vice chair. And Mike, what's your nomination for vice chair?
Well, I don't know if I should nominate
Yourself?
Davey Ray because he's not in the room, or perhaps I should nominate August. Jeff, what do you think?
You know, you seem to be there when we need a vice chair. Are you comfortable in that?
I am comfortable with that. With if everybody thinks that's a good idea, I will continue on in my minimal position as vice chair.
Second.
You're hereby nominated. All in favor? Of
Aye.
being vice chair, aye. Okay. I guess we now move to our public comment expectations. Ben, what were our options on that? Most of the time I've read those. I don't have them memorized.
Yeah, they disappeared from our agendas at some point. So option A is usually generally free-flowing workshop setting, asked to be acknowledged by the chair and asked to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And B is more formal public hearing setting where only accepting comment in those public hearing portions. So I would think of A would be appropriate for a meeting like this one.
I think that is absolutely right. That way we can have, I think, a good conversation with the folks that are there. So I will opt for option A. So let's go to our public comment period for those items that are not on our agenda. So do we have anybody, Ben, teed up to offer general public comments?
Yes, we do. One in person.
Some visitors here. Hi, guys. I should have Zoomed today instead of Sam here. You've got a room full of people here. I hope you can hear me. Mary Rapar Stevenson.
Oh, yeah.
I think you know I've commented in the past about housing in our community and the lack of affordable housing. And even though I don't think this is going to go into your venue, I do think that it's something that the Planning Commission should talk about at some point. What effect second homes and B&Bs and other things like that have on our housing situation and the lack of. So that's something hopefully on your work schedule. We can actually discuss this. And also something, I went and took a ride at Chinadir, and that is a mess over there. It's going to be a mess in traffic for all those people living on the north side. And I don't know how any of those folks are going to come onto Highway 14 with just that one exit on Lutheran Church Road. That should never have happened and not been allowed the way it was built and is being built. It's going to create a lot of problems for folks in the residential area. So thank you very much. And again, I hope we put the issue of policies affecting affordable housing on the agenda in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And I would note that, as we move into this conversation about affordable housing, we've had some discussions about, our zoning and zoning densities. And those are certainly, I think, considerations that, the points that you raise are considerations that would be appropriate in that conversation as we move ahead. With regard to the Chinadere stuff, then there is ultimately alternative access to that subdivision, is there not? Is that moving ahead?
There is. Phase 2 is going ahead toward construction in this spring. They're not able to construct until the start of April. And at that time, there will be a connection to Pine Street and Terry Street at the northern edge there. And so traffic will be able to go from that existing neighborhood down through and exit at Lutheran Church Road. Or alternatively, traffic from the Chinadere subdivision can go and access Loop Road via Pine Street, Shepherd Street.
And phase 2 included that multiple family residential phase. Is that in that phase?
Yeah, there was a limitation on the number of lots that could be used for multifamily residential purposes, and the area where those lots are, or that's zoned for multifamily, is in that second phase.
Okay. And they'll be working on that as weather permits then. Okay, do we have anybody else for general public comment?
Other than the issue that we're here for tonight?
General, yeah.
So we're ready to move the agenda to new business. And that first new business is travel trailers in the R2 two-family residential district. Ben, you want to bring us up to speed on what we need to do there? It looks like that item and the next one are sort of related, are they not?
They're very related. So you'll see as an attachment to both of those, there's a written request to interpret the zoning code in the R2 districts from Deborah K. Allinger Hale, who's with us at the table here. And the request was able to divide that into two parts. One is occupancy of a travel trailer generally in the R2 district, or occupancy of temporary medical emergency residence. Tackling the first one first there with the staff report. So where there's an unlisted use in a district, property owners, proponents, developers can come and say, if you had considered this use when the zoning district was created or the use tables were created, would you have allowed it? And that's laid out in SMC 17-12-020. And there's a specific set of findings that you need to make in order to allow something. The impact of allowing something wouldn't be that it would just be automatically permitted in the district. It would have to be a conditional use that would come back to you for a case-by-case, property-by-property basis that has public notice associated with that. Alternatively, if you make an additional finding that the use is customarily incidental to the instant principal use, meaning that this happens all the time when there's another use in that district, then it could be allowed as an accessory use and not go through the public noticing process. In this case, I've prepared the staff report that lays out some interpretation of the findings that you need to make. I need to note in here when it comes to the property specific nature of this, that this is my neighbor. So don't take anything from me when it's related to the property specific aspects of it. I included some text from a previous interpretation that was done for a vacant property, if that helps. But I want you to really embrace this discussion on your own without relying too much on me. I don't make a recommendation for the same reason on this, and I prepared 3 draft interpretations for you to review. One would be that it could be something that would be allowed on a conditional basis, case by case review. One that it could be allowed as an accessory use, or that it would just be would have been prohibited had it been considered when this zone was adopted. I won't go into too much detail about the analysis that's on there. That's in the staff report and available to answer questions or assist in any discussion that comes up.
Thank you, Ben. Questions? Planning Commission members?
I just have one question for Ben that hopefully he can answer. Ben, out of the zoning districts in the city, how many of them permit mobile homes? Here, the R2 district does not. But without going back to the zoning code, I would just hope you had an answer as to how many of the different districts do allow mobile homes.
Yeah, the top of page 2 is that use comparison across all districts. It's only specifically mentioned in one district, and that's prohibited in the SR suburban family residential district. The only cases where a travel trailer can be occupied as a residence is really more related to the next, well, it's related to both of these, but it's where it is temporarily occupied on a site where there's some active building project that's going on. Maybe a home was destroyed by a fire and the family still needs to live on the property, or maybe it's a new home under construction where the future owner is living in at that time.
Yeah. Nice.
Thank you for that. So travel trailer is synonymous with mobile home in our zoning code then, in terms of how we look at that. Is that a fair?
Mobile home has a separate definition than travel trailer, and it's a single wide built before 1976. Travel trailer could be an RV that was built last year.
So are we looking at a situation, Ben, for something more than just a temporary period of time?
In this case, yeah, and that's why I split it up into 2. So in this case, it would just be, is that something that somebody could occupy permanently? Is that what the Planning Commission, when they set up the original zoning, would have intended had they considered it? And that's your task to do.
Okay.
The person requesting the interpretation is asking to speak, Mr. Chairman.
That would be appropriate, then. Let's do that at this point.
Hi, I'm Debbie.
Welcome, Debbie.
Go ahead.
Okay, we have owned property all my life. It's actually an estate. And we are in the process of going through a probate. My mother had passed away in 1958. No probate was done. And we've run into some problems. And I may need your help because I've done a lot of research. And I believe the property is patented by my great-grandfather. And there's, we're having to get this all sorted out before we die. And my brother wants to buy the property from the rest of us. And I have issues with that, and he knows it. We're not fighting about it. I want answers to why certain things had been done in the past. And so basically what I'm requesting is he has medical issues, and right now he's in Arizona in his motorhome, but I can't see where he should have to spend anywhere from $600 to $900 to park his motorhome when we have vacant land up here. And that's why I'm requesting that for him to be able to park, because he likes going down south in the wintertime. But we're dealing with this land issue aside from everything else.
Okay, questions from planning commission members?
Can I ask what the existing regulations are?
It's an unlisted use in this zone. So unlisted uses are prohibited unless interpreted as allowed in the zone by the planning commission, whatever the question comes up. I think it is useful to say what criteria need to be met in order for them to allow it. So the first one has to be met by the planning commission. They have to state that the use is consistent with the purpose of the applicable zoning district. And so there's a purpose stated in the zoning code, and then the use is described in the zoning code. And then they also have to find that one or more of the following is true. And so the use is expressly allowed in a less restrictive district. And in this case, it's not expressly allowed in a less restrictive district. Or the planning commission has to find that it's of the same general character as the principal and conditional uses that are authorized in the district. And so if they can find that first and the third one, then it's something that could be allowed on a case-by-case basis in the future, subject to the facts of that case.
All right, let me, sorry, Jeff.
I was just wondering if we had anybody else, any other public comment on this particular one before we drop into planning commission discussion.
And we have one in attendance.
Yeah, my concern with that, well, I appreciate the family situation. I think you're opening, excuse me, a can of worms, because now you're gonna have vacant lots throughout the city. Oh, I'm gonna put a fifth wheel on it. And now you're not necessarily hooked up to sewage, water, electricity. It's gonna start looking trashy in town, which we want to eliminate. I don't know, it just, I think it's opening a can of worms by allowing on a vacant lot, an RV to be parked there is now housing.
It's already a can of worms.
Well, no,
It's not opening it, it's just gonna get bigger.
I understand a lot, and I appreciate the nightmare she must be going through as far as all the property issues as far as ownership and probate, et cetera. But to park a vehicle now to become housing on a vacant lot, I think you're really opening a can of worms there. That we really.
So, yeah, I hear you. I want to make sure that our minute taker captures everyone who does speak. So either before or when you're reminded or remember afterward, please just note who you are and then where you're from.
Yeah, Michael Perry, Stevenson.
Michael Perry.
So anyways, I mean, yeah, now what's to say that somebody else has a vacant lot and they're gonna put a camper on it, and next thing you know, they're renting it out to somebody. And when where clearly the regulation, if somebody's house burns down or they're building a home or things like that, that's temporary. And in this case, if it's something that's a one-time, it's 3 months, one-time deal, then those are things that the planning commission, city council and city staff can approve. But to make this allowed is, yeah. Anyways, my 2 cents, sir.
Thank you very much.
Another one here, Jeff.
Okay.
Chuck O'Neill, Jared Stevenson. I just wanted to kind of agree a bit, with Michael. I don't see any problem with temporary conditional use. you know, people are building a home or for whatever reason need to be there temporarily. I don't think it's a good idea to make provisions for that type of housing on a permanent basis. If you're gonna live in it permanently, you might as well build something that's gonna be characteristic of the neighborhood that it's in.
This is not a permanent situation. My family is large. And I have been doing my research, trying to get this taken care of so he could put something permanent on this. And I've run into where the county has taken property, 80 acres up on Red Bluff, 80 acres within the city of Stevenson. They've sold it off for back taxes, knew nothing about it. And so now I'm dealing with all of this because it's patented land, never to be sold as long as heirs are alive. And the problem I've run into is my great grandfather that did this died before I was ever born. So it's a big mess. And how I'm trying to figure out how to fix it without the whole community of Skamania County, because I grew up here. I don't want to affect other people's lives. So I'm trying to do this slowly to figure out exactly why this happened to my family. Because it should never happen to my family. I grew up dirt poor. We have property here. We started with 80 acres and now we're less than 2 acres. We had 80 acres up there, we have 0. I have all the paperwork. I've been working with state archives, national archives, and this whole thing is just a mess. There's titles. I grew up on this property. We've never sold this property, but yet there's been 38 transactions on this property. I can't even find all of them. And this is why I wanted him to be able to come up, sit there if he wants to. He may not even want to, but he should have the right to decide if he wants to stay on our property. And that's why I'm requesting for him to be able to do it. He sold his home and he was going to build something here and we run into this mess. I didn't create it, but Skamania County did.
Thank you, Deborah. Any further public comment?
If it's okay, I might just explain the other staff report too for the same request, the same issue.
Sure, Ben.
So-
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I've prepared the companion memo that would create a new use category because it is referenced here that there's some medical hardship that could be involved in this too. And so you have the ability to interpret either that existing travel trailer use category or new use category. And so in the companion memo, I just started to outline what that might look like. And I base that entirely off of that emergency construction residence. And so in this case, we might be able to consider something on a temporary basis when it's specifically related to a medical hardship. And this is something that I do think that you'll see more of as our community ages. And so there could be a line here where you say that, yeah, that may be something that we want to consider, but it's no door that we want to open on an interpretation basis. We look at that as a traditional zoning code amendment basis, or it's something that you may think is fit for an interpretation. So in this case, that description for the temporary emergency construction or repair residence description breaks down what the use looks like in terms of its structure. And that description specifically references mobile homes and travel trailers as acceptable structures. It provides 3 specific incidences when the use may occur, and all of those are accessory in nature. That's construction of a home, initial construction of a home, repair after substantial damage, or construction at a commercial site where some security caretaker is determined necessary. It also has a duration on it, so there's a 6-month grace period where you can live on it. That grace period starts when a permit is issued, and so the city is the gatekeeper knowing when it starts. And then if the builder needs to exceed that, then they come to planning commission for conditional use approval. I drafted what a similar description might look like for this temporary emergency use. That's on the bottom of page 2 of 3 of that staff report. And it says, residence which may be a mobile home or travel trailer that is 1, located on the same lot as a residence occupied by a person afflicted by a medical condition which prevents independent living, or 2, occupied by an individual with a medical condition which prevents said person from occupying another category of dwelling units. However, no such temporary medical hardship residence shall be inhabited for more than 6 months unless authorized by the planning commission. In that staff report, I then compare that to the construction residence and contrast it as well. So there are issues with that, especially the accessory nature on the second part. And determining the initial date of occupancy. If somebody just moves in to care for their ailing mother, we may not know when that first occurred in order to start the 6-month grace period. And then determining that medical hardship actually exists involves some exchange of information about medical conditions, which I'm not sure that I want to be involved in, or I want the city to be involved in potential HIPAA disclosures and public information. So some things to consider on that, but there are 2 ways to address this. As I said, the first way could just be occupancy of a travel trailer in general, or we could get more specific. With the second way, I didn't go on and draft what the interpretation might look like. I thought it'd be more beneficial to have an initial discussion of what this use might look like before we get into a real comparison of whether that use is consistent with the purpose of the district and whether it resembles other uses that are allowed in that district or not. Hopefully that
Thanks, Ben.
helps bring more context to it.
One point of clarification in my mind, do you think this temporary medical hardship residence use category is something that we could do without making a zoning change?
It's a tough one for me. And it is something that I would really caution you on whether or not to do that. But as I was looking through the interpretation section, it just says a use that isn't listed. And so that could be anything. Trying to get really specific about what you're considering when you're considering an unlisted use is the effort I'm going through right here.
Okay. Is there any further public comment? All right, let's move this into, I think, conversation here among the planning commission members. Mike, August, what are your thoughts?
Let me kick off a little bit here. I think there's 2 issues that kind of are definition issues that can be, I guess, somewhat clarified in that travel trailers traditionally are something that's registered with the Department of Transportation, and they're made to move around, whereas what we think of as a mobile home, which now kind of is more defined as a modular home, is made to carry to the site and then set, in a permanent fashion, hooked up to utilities, etc. So those really aren't interchangeable, but a lot of times they get used interchangeably. So I'm going to take this as specifically dealing with the travel trailer aspect, and what we currently have for emergency use or temporary construction purpose, I think is pretty clear in that you either already have an established residence or you are permitted to be in the construction process. I don't believe that there's any acceptable way to do that before you have a permit, but I would have to defer to Ben as to that, but I'm not aware that that's a situation that you can do, before you get into the permitting process. Is that correct, Ben?
You're correct on that, yeah.
Okay, so that kind of deals with that specific issue. I think there is certainly a discussion that could happen as to temporary medical reason, as caring for an elderly person and the home's just not big enough, or possibly, because of COVID or something, you want to be more quarantined. How that looks, I'm not quite sure. I think we probably would have to look at other counties, municipalities dealt with that same situation. And certainly for a limited time period, I don't think we need to get involved with the, HEPA regulations and determining whether you really have a medical condition or not. So I think, making it more accessible, but in an intelligent way, to be able to do that process, maybe not having to come before the planning and zoning board to get that accepted. But I think that's a conversation that needs to have a lot more depth than what we have right here. And as far as, I feel for the applicant and the difficulty that she's dealing with. But that's not something that we as the planning board have any ability to address. That's my position as it is right now.
Thank you, August. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Chair Breckle. Thank you, August, for those considerations. Yeah, certainly. I would like to say that I believe I can speak for my fellow planning commissioners to say that we are sympathetic to the Allinger family issues here and the dynamics and the complications that are that you find yourself in. But we're tasked to make a zoning interpretation here tonight as to if travel trailers as permanent or as extended occupancy on properties would be harmonious with other land uses in the R2 district. And this is a second consideration of the medical hardship dwellings. And we heard just a couple of public comments that voiced some concerns about the character of the neighborhood, the things that could happen if travel trailers were allowed to be used as residences. The reason I asked early on about the travel trailer and mobile home allowances in other districts is that we do see a new type of travel trailer, the park model RVs, which I think are categorized as travel trailers or recreational vehicles by the state. They're being used elsewhere and even here in the county as temporary dwellings, as short-term residences. I feel we will probably see greater interest in using small park model RVs as residences. I think the economics of households are going to change in the coming years and decades. I think we will see a greater need for more modest dwellings. And the use of travel trailers or park model RVs should perhaps be something that the Planning Commission considers on a more broad basis in more of our zoning discussions about the city as a whole, and perhaps include them in a discussion in the affordable housing and how we can provide the capacity to have additional housing in the city. But here we're being asked tonight to make an interpretation if travel trailers would be consistent in the R2 two-family zone. And I don't see that they are supported by the city's documents or the plan or the zoning district to allow these types of uses, to allow a travel trailer as a residence on a property. And similar to what the commenters in the meeting mentioned, I also share their concerns about the potential negative effects of allowing occupancy of trailers in a residential neighborhood, in the R2 neighborhood. Medical hardships, like August stated, and how Ben also stated, how there typically can be allowed if there is a person in a principal dwelling that needs care. There may be an opportunity to allow those, but our code doesn't currently allow that. I would have reservations about allowing hardship dwelling as a principal use on a property. To just allow a person with a hardship, particularly if we're not going to dig down or request validation that there is indeed a medical hardship, that would open a door for travel trailers being placed on properties that may not need a medical hardship. It doesn't have any principal use on the property, and that could also negatively impact the character and quality of life in Stevenson. And so I'm not willing to support either of these, the interpretation or the potential expanded use of the temporary hardship dwelling at tonight's meeting. I can't, in good conscience, for the residents of Stevenson, support those. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mike. And, I think, Mike, yeah, August, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, thanks, Mike. That was an excellent citing there. I just wanted to touch base on what you're talking about, park model RVs. Yes, they are DOT certified, but they're primarily intended to park in a RV park, and they're actually hooked in, like the sewer has a hookup. So it differs than a travel trailer, which has its own black water tank and gray water tank and is made to reserve those. The park model does not have an onboard septic system. So I think that's more, that park model is more like a mini mobile home, or modular, with the intent of setting it as a more temporarily permanent, if that makes sense. But that isn't what we're talking about right now. And again, I think your point to the fact that there has to be a primary residence already there to then get, a temporary residence of whatever the kind it is, I think is an important aspect of what we're talking about.
His vehicle is a 2006 diesel pusher. It's not an RV. It's all self-contained. Water's on board, sewer, all of that's on board. Like I said, he was going to put some sort of residence on our property, but at this point, we have problems with the county as to what they have done with our property. So yes, he does have medical conditions. He had a heart attack. He's got experimental heart stuff in him. And like I said, he may not even want to do it. It's basically an option for him if he wants to do it.
Thank you, Deborah. Mike, I think you provided I think a good overview and summary, and I don't disagree with any of the points that you've made. I think certainly the Ballinger family finds itself in a difficult situation in terms of, you know, what is the status of their lands and their title to those lands, and that's certainly not anything that you know, the city can deal with. But we are, I think, obligated to also think about the precedent that we may set if we were to allow, I think as August put it, a sort of temporary permanent use of a travel trailer within any zone. You know, certainly if there was a structure to be constructed on this property, if the title can be squared away, well, then the zoning ordinance does allow for the use of that travel trailer on there during that construction. But at this point in time, it doesn't.
You guys keep bringing up the point that it's, you know, it could be an eyesore. I will tell you that in 1969, we built a brand new house out on Ryan Allen's Road. And that is the trashiest looking place right now. And that is an eyesore. And it's disgusting that I drive by that and see all the hard work we put into it just to let garbage pile up all out in the yard. No, and I don't know who, I don't live in the community, so I don't know who to go to say it needs to be cleaned up. It's a health hazard out there. And it was a brand new house. We built it.
There are certainly provisions, I think, both in the county code and the city code in terms of attractive nuisances of that type. So there may be, but I don't think that helps us in this particular case. Again, I think, Deborah, if your brother was going to build a house out there, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. It would certainly.
Well, we used to own all that land where the apartments are. That was my grandfather's land, and this is what we're dealing with. The 80 acres goes all along there. I'm trying to figure out where our property went and why.
I understand. And
meantime, we don't even have enough property left to put a legal shit house on it.
Yeah, I understand that issue. I think all of us understand the difficulties that you're going through in terms of trying to determine what has happened to, you know, your title to land that your family has held in the past.
The city and the county that's done it to my family. That's who's done it to my family. I have the proof, and I will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I think on the issue that's before us today, because that is really, you know, a separate issue than what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is allowing this use of what is under our statute currently a travel trailer placed on a piece of property as a residence. And I think as both August and Mike have stated, and as I agree, that's really not permissible within the existing code, and nor do we feel comfortable making an interpretation that would be appropriate. Yeah, I appreciate Ben's looking at the medical emergency situation, and that may be an issue that the Planning Commission wants to look at. I think down the pike, there may be some issues there that we want to address, but tonight I would not feel comfortable making either of the determinations that Ben has laid out, and you know, that's my sense as to where Mike and August are, but I won't speak for them. I'll allow them to voice their opinions.
If I can assist on page 11 and 12 of the packet, could get us through the first issue of just travel trailers as standalone use. And so that is the draft, interpreting it as prohibited in the district. So the findings there on page 12 would be something to look at to see if you agree as the basis for interpreting it as a prohibited use. And then moving into the second issue about the medical hardship, I didn't draft anything up for you about that, but you could make similar findings and have that, instruct me to draft it so you could deal with that right away at the next meeting.
Mike, did you have your hand up? Something you wanted to say?
No, I was scratching my eyebrow, but I can jump in here and speak. I thank you for that clarification, Ben. And I would also want to, reiterate to Debbie Allinger that this isn't the Planning Commission just considering your specific request. Like Chair Breckel mentioned, it's about the consideration for the city as a whole and the R2 district. We are sympathetic, but it's an issue that would impact far more properties than just yours that you've requested this relief on. So any further discussion from my fellow commissioners on this matter?
Yeah, I would agree that the draft that Ben has for page 12 is appropriate, and also a similar draft that we'd be able to look at for the next meeting for the temporary medical thing. But again, I think that is a topic that we should address in the future and make that an option, because I think it could be important on a temporary basis.
Okay. Ben, I assume we need to make a motion on the findings and the interpretation on page 12.
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion in a second.
I would move to adopt the findings and recommendation on page 11 and 12 that travel trailers are not consistent with the purpose of the R2 residential district. Travel trailer is not expressly allowed in any less restrictive district. The travel trailers are not of the same general character as principal and conditional uses in the R2 district, and can find no affirmative findings on these criteria for using travel trailers as an accessory use.
I would second that.
We got a motion in a second. Is there any further discussion? With that, I'd call for those in favor of the motion to say aye.
Aye.
Now those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, August, you're asking Ben now to go down and look at the temporary medical hardship and come back to us with some alternative language to look at, or are we dealing with that tonight as well?
No, what Ben had said was he hadn't drafted an actual wording for our decision. So we could either just verbally give him the authority to follow those same guidelines that he did for the temporary house or temporary travel trailer, or we can actually ask for that to be written and give it to us for the next meeting.
Okay. Mike, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that I could make a motion that medical hardship dwellings are not currently supported in the code, and to pass it back to Ben for to prepare something in the future planning commission meeting. But I think we could also make a recommendation to table this until we go through a more robust zoning review or consideration for expanding uses and to include medical hardship dwellings when we discuss zoning on a broader basis in the city. So I don't know what would be the preference of my fellow commissioners. But it seems that tabling it until a bigger discussion about zoning in the city might be appropriate.
I would agree with that. Mike, how do you feel about that? August, do you feel there's an urgency to move this?
I would agree that tabling it probably could fulfill, what needs to be done without putting a date to it. If we need to have a determination of the interpretation sooner, then we should probably draft that that draft that we can actually affirm without tabling it for some indefinite period of time.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
The same practical effect. So the definition for prohibited use in the code is any use that's explicitly prohibited in a district. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it has a same adopting an interpretation with findings like you just made makes the travel trailer use prohibited in the R2 district. Failing to adopt something continues to prohibit temporary medical hardship residents in that district. So not acting means that it's prohibited. And including that in the broad look at zoning needs makes sense. And that's something that you can do as you work plan for the 2022 year.
Okay. Well, my sense is we want to table this and take it up as part of a broader examination of the zoning ordinance. I don't think we need a motion to do that. I think we can simply indicate that that's our preference. Ben, do you agree with that?
I agree.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's
With just the note too.
let's go on to the shorelines management. Is that where we are, Ben?
That is where we are.
I have to admit, Ben, that I didn't get through all that text.
Nor did I expect you to. So in December of 2018, the city council adopted a draft shoreline management program as required by Department of Ecology. I'm sorry, the city council forwarded the draft that they intended to adopt pending ecology approval. Ecology has now given their approval to that 2018 action. And in that approval, they give a list of required changes to our draft shoreline master program and a list of recommended changes to that program. All told, there's just over 50 changes proposed. And so what I'm asking you to do tonight is not to act on any of those required recommended changes, but to set a workshop where we can go into those in more depth with the Shoreline Advisory Committee. We do have one member of that committee in attendance and 2 online. There could be more online that I've missed. But to set that meeting where we can go through and the intent there for any of you who were on the planning commission at that time would just be to try to process that very quickly on the dry erase board where we've got the issues laid out. They're in a matrix already from Department of Ecology, and we'll just do a red light, green light, adopt, or red light, yellow light, green light, adopt as recommended. Talk about it, yellow light or red light, don't adopt. And so just try to process through that list of 30 plus in orderly fashion at a special workshop.
So something other than our regular meeting, you want to set up a special meeting basically then, or a special workshop?
Yep.
Well, I would like to make a recommendation or make a motion that we instruct Ben to set a special workshop at the next available opportunity to discuss the shoreline management plan updates.
I would second that.
A second. there any further discussion? And Ben, this would include members of the committee that worked on this?
Yeah. The Shoreline Advisory Committee, group of citizens and property owners, that helped us work through it, and get it to the point where it's at, so.
Let me have a sense here in terms of what the sequence of actions are. We would get together with members of the Shorelines Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission. We'd go through your sort of blackboard or whiteboard situation and say yes, yes, no, yes on these changes. And then would there be a formal hearing and adoption? I mean, what?
The city council needs a recommendation from you all about those recommended changes. So we've got no choice on the
Required
changes, but they do have a choice on those other ones. So bringing it back to this level, processing through those to see if we want to include those or not, is the city's option. We don't have the authority. Well, let's start that way. We don't have the authority to open up everything. We're only looking at those recommended changes. Opening up everything would restart this process. So.
But after this work session, would we have a planning commission meeting to sort of adopt the results of that, or do that at that workshop and then forward that to the city council? Is that the process?
Right. So I think that we'd be able to make the recommendation as soon as we conclude going through that list of 33 recommended changes.
Okay. Well, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye. Thumbs up. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Will do, and now we're on to the topic that most people gave up their Valentine's Day for, to talk about setbacks in the SR district. And I won't do much preamble to that. We had the application. The application was reviewed in the December meeting. Wanted to renotice it, provide additional information in the public notice for the public to contribute their thoughts. And so hoping you can have that dialogue with the public that's here. And if you're ready to make a recommendation of approval of the requested change, to do so to the city council. The addition that wasn't discussed at the last meeting was to incorporate the results of a previous zoning interpretation. That's where the planning commission was asked whether self-storage units were a use that should be allowed in the SR district. You went through a similar process and said, no, they're not similar to the other principal and conditional uses of that district, and they shouldn't be, that they should be prohibited. So officially codifying that as part of our code instead of having it hang out there to the side could be included with this go around.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So we can open this up for public hearing. And I think as we've lined it out on the agenda, we'll start off with those folks that are in favor of this particular change. And once those folks are through, we'll go to those opposed. And if there's anybody else in the audience who has no opinion and is neutral, we'll pick up those folks last. So if we have folks that want to comment in favor of this proposal, now's your time to do so. Please introduce yourself for the record so that we know who's speaking. And Ben, can you orchestrate that? It's a little hard to see from here.
I can. Anybody here to speak in favor? None in person, and I'm not seeing hands come up online. to go through those instructions again, *6 would allow you to raise your hand. And there's one that wants to talk.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. My name is Joel Battistoni. I apologize if there's any feedback. I live in Stevenson. I live in the SR district, and I just actually joined for the other thing, which was about the storage units. But I did want to comment that I have no problem at all with this, other proposal to put the small sheds closer to the property lines. I think it's fine. That's all.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions from planning commission members? Okay, thank you again. Ben, anybody else that wishes to testify in favor?
We do have one. And *9 will unmute you. Or unmute, I guess you're not on the phone.
Yes, my name is Don, live in Stevenson. And the question I have with regard to the sheds, I have no problem with the distance from the lot line. I was wondering if there's a quantity limit or if people can have 1 shed, 2 sheds, 3 sheds. How is that controlled? And the same would be, I'm sorry, the same thing would be with the self-storage units. I'd like to, hopefully, we're going to talk about the definition, what those are. And again, the quantity somebody could put on their lot. Thank you.
Ben, can you help us on that?
Yes, I can. There is a quantity limit, and I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head. I believe that it's 4. Somebody can have their residence and then 4 outbuildings on a property in that zone. If they exceed 4, it would need planning commission approval as a conditional use. The question about self-storage units, none are currently allowed based on that planning commission recommendation. So it's not a use that somebody could put property to in the SR district as it stands.
Does that answer your question, Don?
I guess I'm concerned. It almost seems like if you have 4 of them, you have some type of a business going versus needing 4 for storage. So I certainly appreciate everybody having a storage, trying to keep things in the property organized. I've seen several houses with 1, but saying you can have 4 and then you have to get some approval, it just seems like that's a bit much if you're on a lot that's as small as the lots most of Stevenson here.
Okay, thank you. Ben, who's next?
Well, we had one hand flutter. And I'm not sure that Laura Andrews was ready to talk at this time, or maybe wait till the next one. We can just wait on that unless anyone has gathered their thoughts in person here, wants to speak in favor. Okay.
August?
I had a question. Ben, what is the definition of self-storage unit?
Let me get that. Let me get that to see if we have one.
To clarify, SR, what is this actually stand for?
Suburban residential district, suburban.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking is because we have some clarification on the issue of self-storage, which we addressed several years ago. But that differs from an outbuilding that you would use as a garden shed or something like that. So I just want to make sure that these things don't become interchangeable and a Connex box starts showing up as a garden shed in these setback areas.
Yeah, so thanks for asking that, August. Residential outbuilding is what we consider a shed, and that's an accessory use to a residence. There's a specific list of examples that's I'm seeing. So carports, garages, storage of non-commercial vehicles, greenhouses, storage buildings, and the like, but not patios or play structures. That's listed as a residential use, an accessory to a residential use. And it's separate from the description of self-storage units, which is listed as a commercial use, a commercial activity, and we would treat those differently. The self-storage unit is described as a rental operation leasing space, for example, rooms, compartments, lockers, containers, or outdoor space where clients store and retrieve personal property. So one is a residential category and one is a commercial category. The commercial category is what was reviewed by the Planning Commission in 2019, where they decided that's not a permitted use in the district.
Right, and that was specifically dealing with a steel container structure. So again, I'm on our list of what is a residential accessory building. Do we have any clarification on the difference between like a handy shed or a Connex box being used? I think, the way that appears in the neighborhood is substantially different, whereas, a structure that looks more in keeping with the residential nature conflicts with that of a steel container.
There's nothing in your zoning code that distinguishes a tough shed from a Connex box. So if somebody comes in and wants to permit a Connex box as a shed, we would issue that permit as long as it meets all the other setback lot coverage requirements.
So the distinction we have here is we could have 4 storage sheds on our property under this provision, but we could not use them or rent them out as storage to anybody else.
Correct.
Basically.
Correct.
But there is no real differentiation in terms of the nature of that shed, in terms of what it looks like, whether it's a Connex box or a tough shed or a plastic shed of some kind.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I have a comment about the comp plan. When we did the comp plan review, and the suburban residential area came up for discussion. Part of that discussion was the rural character of that suburban area. So I don't know if that applies here and how the comp plan fits into this. And what when we went through it and, the community decided what they wanted in the comp plan. Is there anything in the comp plan that addresses the SR character?
There's nothing in the comp plan that specifically addresses the suburban residential district. So it'd be a level above the specifics of the suburban residential. The Planning Commission packet has the comp plan policies that are tangential to this topic. We talk a lot, Mary. We use small town character and not rural character. And so rural character doesn't appear in our comprehensive plan. Small town character does. Comments.
Ben, if I may ask, I seem to recall that the city council, there was some prohibition on storage container buildings in the downtown core, and I'm not clear of all the details, if that went through or if that was just considered in the past. Could you just refresh my memory as to where that went, if there was any design guidelines prohibiting
There
storage
was,
containers?
The city council adopted a minimum building height in the downtown zone. You are remembering that correctly. So the city council adopted a moratorium on shipping containers, using shipping containers on as a structure on a property. They worked through that moratorium, or the planning process the moratorium afforded, and the solution was to establish a minimum height requirement for buildings that was taller than a shipping container one.
Thank you. Because I think August raised the very valid concerns about the character of neighborhoods if all of a sudden a bunch of storage containers began popping up. But I think that's a little bit independent of the suburban residential setback requirements that we have before us tonight. Perhaps that is something that we should put on the calendar for the 2022 businesses to discuss storage containers, Sealand containers, Connex boxes in residential lots, and see if we can provide some clarity as to when or if those would be appropriate as accessory buildings, if they can be screened or somehow hidden from view. But I see those as two separate and distinct discussions that we would need to have. If we did make a recommendation on the suburban residential setback reductions here tonight to go before the city council, there could be an open window of time where people could place some storage metal Connex boxes close to the side yards of other people's properties. But if we were to follow that up fairly rapidly with a discussion about the storage containers, we might be able to nip that in the bud before too many get placed in the suburban residential district.
Yeah, but Mike, right now, if I stay within the current setbacks, I can still put a storage container on my property. So we're talking a few feet, I guess, in terms of distance change. So, but I agree, it is a separate issue. Right now, you could put a storage container on your property if you meet the current setbacks. All we're doing is talking about, are we willing to shift those setbacks to allow a property owner a greater degree of flexibility in siting a storage building. Let's get back to the public comments. Ben, did we have anybody else in favor?
I had a clarification. Actually, Robert Muth is talking to us. I'm sorry, he's probably going, how come you're doing that to me?
Just ask the question.
He said, ask Ben which code section allows 4 sheds on an SR zoning?
1715-040-1, it's the third note up to that table.
Okay,
All right.
with that clarification, are we ready to move?
Ben, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Robert Muth, City of Stevenson resident. Ben, only 2 questions. One is, thank you, Chuck Oldfield, for asking a question. I couldn't find your code section for the number of sheds, but the commissioners might want to know also the Connex issue. Yes, we did discuss that while on city council and came to a conclusion that we didn't want them in the downtown district. The question of whether they could be used as sheds on residential property would have a size restriction as well. The sheds themselves have a restriction on size. So I'm not sure that your typical Connex storage box for a contractor would meet that size requirement relative to having it used as a shed. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
And then Don has raised his hand again, Jeff.
Okay, I recognize Don. Don, give us your last name too for the
It's
record.
Don Tucker, Stevenson resident.
Thank you.
Question again, we talked about this the last meeting. We wanted to allow people with the odd sized lots, the smaller lots, the shed 5 feet from the back and the side. And that certainly makes all sense in the world to me. But again, to have smaller lots, the reason for this discussion, now we're gonna have still 4 sheds per lot. So I'm questioning the 4 sheds, because to me, it seems to be getting more towards a business than just having 4 sheds on a smaller lot here in Stevenson. The rural part of it, I'm not sure the right definition. The larger lots, the 2 acres, 4 acres, whatever here in Stevenson, I can understand it. But here in the city where a lot of people are under that acre and they say 4 per lot, to me seems to be a bit much. Just my comment on that. And with regard to the Connex boxes, I've lived in an area where people were putting Connex boxes, and I can tell you the whole neighborhood changed with these Connex boxes, and it just became a different neighborhood. And so I question, you talk about addressing in 2022, I would appreciate you address it sooner than later to stop Connex boxes on the smaller lots here in the residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And as Robert Woods pointed out, that may not be as much of an issue if in fact we've got a size limitation on how big those storage sheds may be. That may actually not allow a storage or a storage container, a steel storage container to be placed. But I think that's something we should confirm as part of this process. August?
Yes, it's 200 square feet is the size. So a half Connex, a 10 by 20 would fall under that. So you could put 4 of those on your property.
Thank you, August. So it doesn't sound like we've excluded Connex boxes in their entirety. Ben, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, another clarification question, if I could. Chuck Oldfield, Stevenson. My understanding is that anything over 150 square feet needs to be permitted, doesn't it?
There isn't a size limitation on permits at all. So come in and get the permit. We'll verify that it meets the setback requirements. If it's above 200 square feet, then it needs to go in for building code review so that it meets the structural stability requirements of the building code. But the city reviews it for.
I was just thinking of the size restriction as being a limitation for the type of storage shed.
Yeah, there's no floor. So on that, there's a floor on building code compliance. There's not a floor on zoning code compliance, avoiding building on top of the city utility. And that's what we do.
So let's try and move ahead with the hearing. Ben, do we have anybody else with comments in favor?
In favor.
Well, kind of in favor, but kind of against.
Start with the in favor.
Well, so the person who started this process because of their property, I get it. And yeah, they should be able to put a shed, and I have no doubt that person has a beautiful home, and they're not gonna put up a Army Connex box, but they have a unique lot. So why can't the planning commission, either one, give that person a variance, look at the type of box they're getting, or, shed they're gonna put up, whatever. Make sure it looks appropriate to the neighborhood, to the community. It makes sense. On the flip side, it's pretty scary hearing that right now I could go out to the Army surplus place and I could buy used Army Connex boxes that easily meet that 10 by 20 and put them right on my property. And that would definitely change the appearance of my neighborhood. So I'm sure the person who's once this process completed, and I appreciate that, maybe the planning commission needs to just sit back for another month or two, iron out how many storage sheds could be on a property, the type of storage sheds, Can there be a variance? So if somebody has a triangle lot and, you know, there's no way they could put a storage shed on, that they can, you know, it could go to the planning commission, or they look at it, they look at the shed and say, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we approve it, but seems like right now you're really opening up a can of worms.
Your name, sir?
Michael Perry, Stevenson.
Thank you, Michael.
And again, this, I'm thinking about maybe a little 5x5 tool shed for, you know, my lawnmowers and everything else to, you know, keep my garage clear, but it's going to be very nice. It's, you know, it's not going to be an eyesore. Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks that just want to give us their comments on this. I'm tired of, they tried to just look for folks in favor or opposed. If you've got a thought on this, please share it with us at this point.
We're at the point where we can talk about being opposed. My name is Chuck Oldfield, Stevenson. I think one of the things that kind of surprises me about this whole discussion is that most of these provisions are already outlined in our CCNRs. And if anybody goes to their deed of trust and looks at the language that's there, the setbacks, the quality of the sheds, the sizes, and all those things are kind of stipulated in the CCNRs. I would not be in favor of any zoning changes that would vacate those provisions for the people that have already purchased their homes, signed their deeds of trust, and had an understanding by zoning language that was already been codified, and have those things changed. Now, if somebody wants to get an exception, they can get permission of the adjacent householder that doesn't have any objection to their shed being inside that current setback limit, that they could be handled as an exception rather than doing a blanket change to existing zoning laws.
Thank you. And Ben, am I correct in my understanding that CCNRs can set a more stringent standard and the zoning can't set a more lenient standard or binding or lenient standard? Is that correct?
Yeah, they could also set a less lenient standard. The city doesn't look at CCNRs when it reviews applications in one way or the other. So if there are two sets of standards that a property owner has to meet, one based on their CCNRs and one based on their zoning, they're going to have to meet those. If one passes zoning but doesn't pass a CCNR, well, then it's not being built, and vice versa. If it passes a CCNR but not zoning, it's not going to be built either.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Who's to testify? Well, not hearing anybody else chime in. Thank you all. I think we've got some good comments here, and I think certainly something to think about. Where we had a conversation that started out in terms of what should the setbacks be, we've identified several other issues in terms of size of storage sheds and the number of storage sheds that are allowed. You know, I guess I would pose to my fellow planning commission members, is this something that we want to take some time to look at and perhaps consider not just the setbacks, but the number of storage sheds and their size, and making a recommendation to the city council? August?
Yeah, I would refer back to my original comment, I believe was it September when this first came before us? And that the zoning change application form specifically asks for any existing restrictive covenants or conditions. So that's part of the zoning change information that would be something that we would consider. And the site plan and the the neighborhood already had an existing covenant. So I requested that, and we did receive that, I believe, at the December meeting. And as Ben said, it's not, they can have a more restrictive ruling than the city would. And again, I go back to the, this is a very broad sweep to address a very specific issue. The example in the lot that the applicant provided, lot number 5, shows that there's a 10-foot utility easement on the back side of the lot and a 5-foot on the side lot. So, I mean, there's just in the example that they gave, they're already asking to put a structure on top of a utility easement, which, I have a problem with that on multiple levels. So, I mean, I can see on the subdivision map that there are some strange shapes, and I think I talked with Ben about different options on having variances when you're restricted by a condition that you did not have any control over. However, when you buy a lot and you build a house, you are in complete control of what space you have and what space you don't have. To come after the fact and want to put additional space or change the way that it is and argue that you don't have enough space left over because you built your house too large. I don't see that as a valid argument. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, thank you, August. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favor of moving a positive recommendation to the city council on this matter. I look at this issue, I see that in other districts in the city, a 5-foot rear yard setback is allowed in every zone for small sheds under 200 square feet in size. And when I looked at the suburban residential breakdown of the lots, the majority of the parcels are small. I believe a majority are under a ½ acre in size. I heard from property owners in the suburban residential district that wholly supported the reduction of the setbacks to allow greater flexibility on their properties, to place a small storage shed more consistent with the setbacks in other neighborhoods in town. I don't see it as a very contentious or even something that would open up the city to a lot of unappreciated or development that would negatively affect the character. In and of itself, reducing the setbacks would not do that. But we did identify some issues were brought up tonight that raised some additional concerns about the character of our neighborhoods and the character of the city of Stevenson and how certain types of buildings might look in this reduced setback, or perhaps anywhere on the properties. Like you mentioned, Jeff, you could have, if you had the room, you could have 4 metal Connex buildings placed on your property today. So I would hope that we could move this forward to the council for their consideration. I don't see it as anything that would create a lot of negative impacts, but we'll have to defer to what we as a planning commission feel. If we need to discuss this further in a meeting in another month, that would be what we would do.
Mike, thank you. I agree. I don't think the setbacks are a particularly onerous change. I think they're pretty straightforward, and I think they're reasonable. I I don't know whether at some point in time we want to talk about the size and the number of sheds. That's not an issue that we originally set out to deal with. It's one that sort of has emerged through these discussions. And it may be something we look at. And I guess the question I'm asking is, do we want to move ahead and simply do a favorable recommendation on the setbacks? Or do we want a more comprehensive package that goes back, that hits not just the setbacks, but the size and the number of sheds?
I'd like to make a clarification.
I'm willing to go either way. We have a comment?
Chuck Oldfield again. I'd like to make a clarification. The existing setbacks that are provided for in the CCNRs that we have show for a 15-foot setback. So what you're saying is if you made this recommendation to change that to 5 feet, does that mean that if we have no remedy at all on the CCNRs? And the issue that we're thinking about is that for those of us that did, like I designed our house, our lot, and I put my shed, and I designed our entire landscaping and gave a 15-foot easement to my neighbor, so they don't have to sit in their backyard and look over a fence and see my structure sitting there. It does affect the tenor of the neighborhood. And I don't think anybody, if you signed an agreement with the city, basically your CCNRs, the agreement that this will be provided as a part of all the houses that are living in your community, is the city going to go ahead and then pass zoning that will basically nullify all of that?
No, they would not. If your CCNRs require a 15-foot setback, if the city makes a change, you're still going to be bound by this CCNRs.
Okay. And what's our remedy if there's no code enforcement in town? So what's our remedy if somebody decides to build a shed 5 feet off the fence line?
Your CCNRs should provide you with that mechanism for seeking a remedy.
You have to sue them.
You've got an attorney right there.
August?
Yeah, I mean, this, as Chuck said, this goes back to my original concern was in this district, anyone who bought and built in it had the expectation when they bought that property that that is what they were buying into. If the city or the planning, zoning, or the city commission decides to lessen that, are you diminishing the value that those people who bought and invested in their property? I believe you're discounting that. Again, in some circumstances, yes, there is an inability to meet the standards, and that we should have a mechanism for addressing that as a variance if it's something that is not under your control. If you buy an empty lot and design a house and put it on there, you had control over that. Your builder had control over it. You had control over it. You paid to have that done. I can't see how it's prudent of us to go in and make a broad sweeping change because of a very few set of circumstances that could be addressed with a variance of some type. That's been my opinion, and it remains so.
Yeah. I think this request to change the zoning present an opportunity for the city to reconsider the zoning of the suburban residential district. It isn't just the Hidden Ridge subdivision, which has already been mentioned. The CCNRs are would regulate the setbacks in that subdivision, but this isn't just about the Hidden Ridge subdivision. It's about the entirety of the suburban residential district.
I think the complaint originally came from the Hidden Ridge development.
That's correct. But what it did is it provided an opportunity for us as the planning commission to consider the setbacks in the suburban residential district as a whole. I heard from people who don't live in the Hidden Ridge subdivision that support this as a liberalization of their property rights in the suburban residential neighborhoods. And so while it may not, if we did make a recommendation and this was adopted by the city council, it may not change anything at all in the Hidden Ridge subdivision at all, because the CC&Rs will restrict. But I think this gives the city and the planning commission opportunity to reflect on, is that 20-foot setback for small sheds still appropriate in the suburban residential district? And I think we had seen some information in the packet that had originally been the setbacks that were established before widespread water and sewer connections were available in the city. And those were placed with consideration of sound use of the lot, of the parcel allocation, that you would need a certain size, would need a certain area to be able to install these utilities, that the lots may not need that setback or that much area. And perhaps the 20-foot setback is no longer the best metric for yard setbacks in the suburban residential district. I feel comfortable with making a recommendation tonight to forward this as a positive recommendation to the city council. Because I think it opened an opportunity for us as a planning commission to consider, is that 20-foot still appropriate, 20-foot yard setbacks for small sheds still appropriate in the suburban residential district? I don't feel that it is. We have many small lots in that district. More and more houses are being connected to water and sewer. I see it as something that would grant property owners greater flexibility on their properties. Certainly, I understand that the self-created hardships. Certainly, that would preclude a person from being able to build things on their property. And sometimes even former owners can cause a self-created hardship that a future owner has to deal with. But really what's before us tonight is if we should recommend to the city council to relax the side yard setbacks for small, or the yard setbacks for small sheds in the suburban residential district. And I would make a motion to make a recommendation to forward a positive recommendation to the city council on this matter.
Thank you, Mike. We have a motion. We have a second. Thank you, August. Do we have a second?
No, I wasn't seconding. I was wanting to address some of the issues that Mike had brought up. Yeah, I think this did open an opportunity for a bigger discussion. And again, you know, we're talking about a change to an entire zoning district based on an individual issue that was brought up in a particular subdivision which has smaller lots. It does not represent the whole or the majority of the other lots that are in the SR districts. There's a reason that those setbacks were set. It's possible that Hidden Ridge should have not been built in the SR and they should have applied for a zoning change for that area before they built that subdivision. That's a different issue. My concern is still that we're applying a very broad solution to, and it's not even a solution to the applicant because they still are not going to be able to put the shed where they would like to. A broad solution to an individual problem which can be better addressed in an individual variance situation, which we don't currently have the mechanism for. But as Mike said, it did open that discussion up. And I think that's one that is more appropriate than a wide open zoning change that does affect multiple lots that are of the appropriate size, are currently built on, and represents more of what the SR district embodies.
So August, can I just ask a quick question? Do you see the proposed setbacks as not being appropriate for the SR district in general?
I believe that the larger SR district and the application that we have here are not similar enough to have such a broad decision made for it.
And Mike, you sort of felt like it was, you'd heard that folks outside of the Hidden Ridge folks that petitioned for this change, you had heard that they thought this was a desirable change.
That's correct. I believe that some of the comment letters we received in response to the initial public notices also reflected that. But I didn't go back and collate all those and determine where addresses were located. But I believe we heard some positive, I believe we heard more positive comments about this relaxation of the setbacks than negative comments or concerns.
And I'd agree. We did hear more in favor of, however, as a planning commission, we are tasked with having to consider the ramifications of a decision, not just deciding what is popular with everyone else. There is repercussions down the road, and for us to, again, make a very broad sweep for something which would be better addressed with a mechanism for a variance, I think is really more where the conversation needs to head.
So in general, you think the current setback requirements are appropriate in the SR district?
I think they were established with good reason, and I think as we go forward with different types of development, those are things that we need to consider. But at this point in time, because of this application and specific that brought this issue up, I don't see that changing these to a less restrictive thing is in the best interest of the community.
To tell you, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage here, not having been at that December meeting. So, and hearing some of your other communications, discussions you folks have had. So, I'm a little bit reluctant to go one way or the other unless we had sort of a clear consensus between the two of you. So, at this point, I think the motion dies for lack of a second, but I'm still, I guess in my own mind, it's not clear to me that changing these setbacks would be detrimental to the nature of the SR district. But perhaps we need to reflect on that. Maybe we need to get Davey engaged in that conversation and sort of revisit it. So,
Jeff, a couple things.
yes, Ben.
So, meeting process wise, because you're such a small group, as chair, you can second or make motions or second motions as chair per the planning commission bylaws. So FYI on that. The other thing is I want to encourage action by the planning commission, whether that action is to recommend approval or recommend denial, but just act and have the confidence to act, especially because this is an application that you're looking at. And so this doesn't go to city council or the city council can't adopt anything if they don't have a report or a recommendation from the planning commission. And so whether it's a recommendation to deny this application or a recommendation to approve it, I think we need to forward something to them. And we can look at the other tangential issues that have come up tonight.
All right, thanks, Ben.
I would like to motion that based on this application and the specifics dealing with this application for this set of circumstances, that we cannot find in good faith a reason for making the reduction in the setbacks at this time without better clarification and defining the various elements that have been brought up by this application.
I guess that goes further than I feel comfortable with. You know, I think that the balance here that I see is that if we're going to take an action here tonight, I would probably second Mike's motion at this point in time and send that to the planning commission. I think the arguments that have been raised in the Hidden Ridge, you know, are arguments that could be raised in anywhere in the suburban residential district. And I don't, like I say, I wasn't privy to your prior meeting and in the conversations there. I don't see an adverse impact to increasing those setbacks or adjusting those setbacks. So, you know, with that, you know, if we're going to go ahead and make a decision tonight, in terms of Ben's, I would second Mike's motion.
And I want to clarify too, a hung decision by the planning commission is still a recommendation that the planning commission is hung if you don't want to take either one of those options, but something to move it forward and give these people a decision that they have asked for.
You know, Ben, at the outset, I was, you know, I felt like this was a reasonable change. If I thought we could move it and come to that, you know, overcome some of the comments that we've heard tonight through further discussion, I would be up for, you know, for deferring that. But if we're making a decision tonight, if that's our sense that we should make a decision tonight and move this to the planning or to the city council, I'm seconding Mike's motion.
You can't second the dead motion. You have a motion on the floor.
I don't think it was dead. All we had was two motions. If Mike wants to make his motion, I will second it. So
I would like to make two motions, and I would like to make a motion that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council to reduce the setbacks in the suburban residential neighborhood to 5 feet for small sheds as proposed in the packet tonight. Motion number one. And also motion that we revisit accessory buildings on the 2022 Planning Commission calendar.
I would second both of those. Any further discussion?
Codifying self-storage units.
Is that part of the same motion? Do we need to add that into this, Ben, or can we do that separately?
You can do that separately.
And do we have any further discussion?
I think they're ready to go.
Is there any
Jerry.
discussion before we take a vote on it?
I disagree with the first motion, but I do agree with Mike's second motion and that there needs to be more clarification and discussion going forward.
We have a member of the public that wants a last word too, Jeff.
Okay.
Just a last word. If you choose to codify this and vote for the changes, I understand that we have remedy through our CCNRs, but basically by painting this whole thing with a large brush, the only remedy you're leaving to any homeowners under these CCNRs is to sue their neighbor if they choose to build something within, the 5 feet. As opposed to the 15 feet that's allowed right now in the CCNRs. Because there's nobody, if they say that the county in this area is zoned to allow for it, and the only difference is our CCNRs, they're gonna go ahead and do it. And there isn't anybody in town that's gonna stop them from doing it. We don't have any code enforcement. We've had some sheds already being built right on fence lines. The other thing, you could have a 12-foot high garage sitting on somebody's fence line right behind your house, and that's what you get to look at when you're sitting in your backyard trying to enjoy your yard.
Okay, thank you. Further comment?
I would just affirm what Chuck just said, isn't that I think this decision is in nature possibly diminishing the value that individuals who bought property in this zone were expecting. They have that right to expect that. That is the property that they bought. That's how they designed their home. And for us to come in and make a zoning change that changes that without any consideration for that value, I think is inappropriate.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, August. August is opposed. Okay. That's on the first motion. We have two motions, right, Mike? And so the second motion is consideration of accessory buildings in a zoning review. Any discussion on that?
I don't know if we've set the calendar for the year. I don't believe we did at the last meeting, or if we did, I may have missed that calendaring, but we should probably discuss that calendaring maybe at the next meeting, if not at the end of tonight's meeting.
Okay, let's put that on the agenda for our work session at the next meeting in terms of our annual agenda and calendar. Any further discussion?
I would say that discussion about a variance mechanism for any of these zoning districts is probably also appropriate and may have resolved the situation in a much better way.
Okay, so then we should look at what our current variance provisions are as well, I guess, and see whether or not those would have been adequate. Okay, on the second motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. All right. Joanne, I see you've had your hand raised for some time. Was there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, actually just some technical details. Jeff, I don't think you ever really officially ended the public hearing. I just need to note when that took place.
No worries, Joanna, it wasn't a public hearing, just a workshop.
Oh, but there was public comment?
Yeah.
I'm confused. Okay. And well, I'm going to pull out my parliamentarian hat, and usually motions only one at a time is entertained.
Yeah, I
Just so we
apologize.
know. Because it got confusing as to what was happening when and who was doing what. That's all.
Yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah, I think we got carried away there. I think you can say that Mike's initial motion sort of died for a second. August made a motion that died for a second. Mike came back and made two additional motions, and those were seconded and passed.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, Ben, comprehensive plan amendment.
you want to forward recommendation to codify the prohibition of self-storage
Yes.
in the SR. If consensus is good enough for you, it's probably good enough for city council.
Are you comfortable with that, Ben? I think that reflects the feelings that the three of us have in terms of our prior conversation. Do you feel it'd be better if we had a motion?
Just want to make sure that that's covered before something goes in that you didn't agree with or doesn't go in that you wanted.
It sort of felt like that was part of the wrap up in the staff report and the action that we took. But if you feel it needs a separate action, I'd be happy to do it.
Just consensus.
We all okay with that? August? Mike?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm perfectly also happy making some findings and a quick recommendation and a motion, but whatever's best for the city.
If you've got a quick motion, we will entertain.
I would like to make a motion that the planning commission can't make an affirmative finding that storage units are consistent and that we do not, we would recommend continuing to prohibit their use.
August?
I would second. Sorry, I had to unmute.
That's all right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Ben, are we now ready for the comprehensive plan amendment?
We are. So in 2019, the city staff submitted a comprehensive plan amendment proposal that occurred, the planning commission was scheduled to start looking at that in March of 2020, and that's when everything shut down. And so instead of making a comprehensive plan amendment with limited ability to engage the public at that time, the city staff that submitted the application said, don't worry about it, just review it on the next comprehensive plan amendment cycle. And so that 2 years has gone by. We're now in 2020 and picking up that cycle. Wanting to include that within the special meeting that we would potentially within the special meeting that we look at the shoreline management program, or just move it to the next planning commission agenda would be fine too. But give you the opportunity to re-engage with that, just reintroduce what the amendment request was. It was to change the goal number 8 of the comprehensive plan to encourage capital improvement planning, where we're planning for the future needs of the utilities of the city and other capital facilities like parks and city offices, the fire hall, instead of dealing with issues as they pop up, creep up, and taking more proactive role in the capital facility planning, connecting that to your land use plan. So more to come on that when you discuss it, and it's up to you if you want to address that the same special meeting as the SMP, or wait until the March regular meeting.
Thoughts on this? If I recall correctly, I don't think this is going to require a lot of time, has it been? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward when we sort of glanced at it when it was first submitted. But I'd leave it up to Mike and August in terms of thoughts as to whether or not you want to attach this to the special workshop, or whether or not it's something we could handle within the timeframes of the March meeting.
I think we should attach it to the special meeting just to be as timely as we can, even though it's been on hold for a while, to allow the the city to begin working on capital improvement planning. So I would recommend attaching it to the special meeting.
All right, August,
I would second Mike's proposal.
so be it. So let's attach it to the special meeting, Ben.
Okay.
All right, staff and commission reports. Ben?
3 staff reports, just briefly. So at the end of last year, we submitted for a Department of Ecology grants on shoreline public access and trails planning. We received that, so $72,000 will come to the city to develop a comprehensive public access plan for our shoreline areas. Again, those are areas within 200 feet of Rock Creek, Rock Cove, Columbia River, or Ash Lake if we ever annexed out to that area. The proposal that we submitted really turns the public access planning from a regulatory point of view, which is what we have now, where if somebody brings a project in, we'll analyze what that project's impact is on the public access to the water and mitigate any impact that it would have. This would change it to more of a proactive step where we're identifying what public access we want to those water bodies, budgeting for how to acquire that public access, and then acquiring public access separately from the regulatory process. So we've been awarded that. We still are working with Department of Ecology on the grant agreement. So we're ways out from actually getting going in earnest on that. But once we get that grant agreement in place, we'll seek a consultant to lead us through this, have very real talk discussions with the property owners that we'd be looking to acquire public access sites from or establish some public access over. And anticipating all that to be done by middle of 2023. So that's one where we are responding to the petition that you all received in the at some point in 2021 about Rock Creek and the trespass issues, and so trying to plan out of the problems that currently exist in a comprehensive way.
Thanks, Ben. You know, you said you're going to be working with, potentially affected property owners. I assume there'll probably be a general sort of community outreach too, will there not?
Absolutely. And where we'll start with that is we have public access goals in our Shoreline Master Program right now, which prioritize continuous public access, pedestrian access along those water bodies. And so we've got a starting point. We're not just starting from zero. We've got a starting point, and so we'll have the general public outreach affirming what our real goals are, so that they can be used as a basis of having those conversations with the affected owner.
Good.
And we were the only one, this is a pilot program from Department of Ecology saying, hey, we've got money to assist your shoreline planning, shoreline management program implementation. Tell us what would assist you. We were the only one that said a comprehensive public access plan. So it's interesting for us. The last one that the contact that I talked to at Ecology had seen was in the early 2000s, the last public access shoreline plan that was developed for a community. So we don't have that deep base of other municipalities to turn to. So we're going to forge some new ground with this. And it's going to be really exciting for us and for the state to review what a new one looks like. So.
Well, congratulations and nice work on being able to secure this grant and to take that initiative.
Yeah, Thank you, for saying that. I am excited about this too, for the reason I said that a lot of what planning does is regulation. And so it's reactive, it's negative, you negate what somebody wants to do. You want to put a shed 2 feet from your property line? And that's not a very rewarding process. This is a positive effort. This is, oh, you want access to the shorelines. Let's go figure out how to do that and let's build some pedestrian trails. So it's a positive step. It is something that's especially necessary in a slow growth area like we have, where fast growth areas are responding to projects all the time. They're doing the assessment of impacts and saying, all right, your project is gonna prohibit this public access along the shoreline that's existed for a long time, provide a space to do that. And then they have to do that. And so the community ends up with that public access solidified. Because we're slow growth, we don't have that opportunity. And you don't get it unless you are more proactive, like we're trying to do with this. So it's what I'm excited about.
Good, good. I'm anxious to see this one move ahead.
The next one here, sewer main D extension. It's part of our sewer planning process. Main D extension would go from right out here at City Hall up Loop Road to serve an unserved area of town where there's existing buildings on septics that are failing. There's potential for redevelopment in those areas. That's a project that's moving forward. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up here is because it's an example of the city using some of the tools available to it for making projects happen. So it's partially grant funded. And then other funding for the project was created by doing a latecomer agreement on that. So we have the engineering drawing, we have the engineering estimate for what it costs to do the extension. We said, okay, adjacent property owners, are you willing to bear your proportionate share of the costs? We laid that proportionate share out in an ordinance, and they were willing to, if they were to connect to that line over the next number of years. I don't know what it is, but so they'll be paying their way there. So it's using tools that are available to us that we haven't always used before. So that's another exciting one to see come forward. It's also part of the larger strategy where the city's water system is this big, covers this much of town, but the sewer system covers this much of the town. We just went through the water and sewer planning processes, and so setting out the projected expectations for the different systems over the next 10 and 20 years. For the water system that's already this big, we're saying, okay, let's focus on repairs to that existing system. Focus on replacing undersized lines or lines that break all the time, and not focus on expanding the system. For the sewer system though, we said, okay, let's focus on expanding that system to cover more areas of town. It creates a greater customer base, but it also allows for development on the fringes to develop at similar densities to the rest of town. Where right now, the cost of extending sewer from City Hall up to the top of Frank Johns Road would kill a project. No project is gonna do that. Taking it in smaller steps, paying for it through grant funds, paying for it through existing owners connecting to that, helps us get it there. Helps us get the sewer system closer to the water system boundary, so that when a property owner does want to develop, they can do so at the same density as is happening at the rest of areas of town. sorry, losing steam here. Public Works staff, we lost our Public Works director in December. And then 2 other employees, Public Works employees found employment elsewhere. And we have replaced the 2 Public Works employees now, and a new Public Works director is scheduled to start in March. So we had been down staff for a long time. It feels like a long time, especially during the plow window, but getting back up to full staffing on Public Works side, and still some work to do there, but exciting to have a full crew again.
Will we have a chance to meet the new Public Works Director, perhaps at our next meeting?
She starts the day of your next meeting. So I haven't talked to her about coming in that night yet, but it's something that we will definitely make that connection between the Planning Commission and Public Works. More as we talk about the subdivision codes, land division codes, specific projects that come in, capital facility planning for sure. Yeah, excited. I'm excited about her, what she can contribute to your discussions.
Good. Good. Anything else, Ben?
Nothing from me.
Any questions for Ben? Any thoughts, Mike?
Just a quick item that I had mentioned to Ben during the snow event to put forth a consideration of snow clearing on the sidewalks in the downtown core. I don't know that we need to discuss that this year, but I would hope that we could maybe have that discussion before the next winter season. I saw people walking in the street for 2 weeks because the sidewalks weren't cleared downtown. And I think it presents hazards to the public. So I don't know if, Ben, you had any opportunity to prepare some materials for that, or if we could do it at the next meeting, or if this is also something we could put on the calendar at next meeting for discussion during 2022. But I think it's something we should discuss.
Thanks, Mike. And I wouldn't be lulled into complacency by this false spring we've had here over the last week or so. We may get another dose of snow. We used to get regular shots about this size. So I'm not putting my boots away.
I mean,
August, anything, any last words? Okay. With that, I think we're ready to adjourn. A motion to do so.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. There's a second from August, I assume. It's a wave anyway. So we stand adjourned. Thank you all. And thanks to
Thank you,
everyone
Chair.
who joined us tonight.
Thanks to the public.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Chair. Doug.
Good night.